They feel like if they have a political perspective that someone disagrees with, that one opinion, you're then put in a box, you're labeled, you're dismissed, and you're dehumanized. You're thought of as less than. Not because of a behavior or a character, right? Like there might be times in life where we have legitimate reasons to think of people who are less than. If you're super unethical, if you cheat, lie, steal, etc.
Yeah.
We're just talking for if someone has a difference in opinion, you're considered less than. That's to me the real danger. Right?
So when I say Ryan, I've really looked forward to this time together. We've been building a friendship for the last couple of months, and I've really grown to love you as a person because of the way you are and the way that you make me feel important when we're together. And I want to be more like that. You know, I think I am somewhat like that, but I think that as an interviewer, I just really want to make people feel like they're the focus of things. It's not about me. And so I've really learned a lot from you. Not just in that area, but this is Ryan Nakade, and he is a mediator. He works with CURE-PDX, which is a very unique group in Portland. And especially when you think about the context of the last 5 years, what you've spent your time doing, trying to work with very different groups of people to bring them together. I think it's so intriguing what you do. It's so intriguing how you do it, and just the way you come across. And maybe you could talk a little bit about who you are and why you're doing what you're doing, because I am fascinated with the fact that you ended up in mediation, and I don't know how you get there. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. How did you get to this place?
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for having me on, for all the kind words. And the appreciation is certainly mutual. And we've only had a few conversations, but I'm also really intrigued by who you are and really admire the work you're doing and the kind of attitude that you bring in such a polarized time to really making an effort to check your own bubble and echo chamber and then make a deliberate effort to get out and talk to people from very different sides and see where there's opportunities to find common ground or to depolarize some of the tension. So you feel like I'm interested in you because I am very much interested in you, and not everyone gets that same treatment probably, but I think we just have a lot of commonalities. And in terms of how I got to where I am now, I ask myself that question every day. But in a nutshell, I'm originally from Hawaii. And my wife and I moved to Portland in 2016. There was the election, and obviously there's always been a lot of polarization and division politically in this country for as long as I can remember, but 2016 seemed to have been particularly inflammatory. And so I became very interested in what we can do about this. And so in 2019, it's funny because I had moved to Oregon and had a hard time finding a job. And I saw that the local city, and this was a city in Gresham, Oregon, had a basic mediation training. And I thought, well, what the heck, I'll apply and see if I can get a scholarship and do a 50-hour basic mediation training. And if that gives me a career as a mediator, cool. But if not, I want to use these skills, these conflict resolution, dialogue, bridging skills from the mediation training and apply it to the political realm and see if I can make a dent in this really stultifying climate of polarization that we find ourselves in. And so I took the training, and one thing led to another. I met people. It opened up a whole new world for me. I learned the skills. I practiced the skills in different ways through personal conversations, through community mediations, through facilitating contentious meetings on different topics like family decision meetings for the Department of Human Services, and kind of got some of that practice, and then started to reach out to and partner with different nonprofits and organizations in the community that are really dedicated specifically to this kind of political and ideological bridging work. From there, I got pulled into the CURE-PDX project, which I can talk about more in a moment. But that's kind of the winding, twisting journey that got me to where we are today.
It seems so natural the way you say it. It seems like a natural progression, but I know that it must have been really interesting for you to be on the receiving end of that. So CURE-PDX, I mean, it was a firestorm in Portland. This was a crazy time in that city.
Literally firestorm.
Yeah, really. And so one of the things they say about the 9/11 incident in New York City was that the first responders ran into the area of danger. They ran towards danger instead of away from it. You seem to have run toward what was going on in Portland and not trying to pull back from it. What was it that was going through your mind about, why was this interesting to you? what was going on in your own city at the level that it was happening, the violence that was happening there? Why was that important to you?
Sure. Well, I'll be honest. I think part of my interest in this kind of work also came from my frustration with some of the existing mediation and bridging organizations, because while they do wonderful work in their kind of lane or their avenue, they only reach certain types of people, right?
Yeah.
The people who are willing to come to the table for a dialogue are usually the people who don't need it the most. Right? It kind of self-selects for like-minded people who maybe nominally lean liberal or lean conservative, but they're kind of centristy, kind of civically minded, moderate types of people.
Yeah.
And the people who want to break things and escalate fights in the streets are not the kind of people who would show up to a dialogue workshop or a mediation session. And so I said, how can I bring some of these skills I learned and go beyond the table of mediation in its conventional sense, and take these skills into the wild, take these skills into the streets? Can I de-escalate something at a protest, counter-protest event if things get a little spicy, right? Can I have a random conversation with someone, Antifa, Proud Boy, far left, far right, center, off the spectrum, it doesn't matter. And just use these skills and talk to them like they're people, like a person. See what makes them see what makes them click and tick, and see why they're here and what they want to get out of this, and how they think about conflict, how they want to handle conflict, and what they want me to understand about their view that they don't think I understand as an outsider, right? So I was just really curious and wondering if I could do anything to help the community. And I made a joke yesterday to my wife that I have almost zero adrenaline junkie DNA in me. Like, I'm not like into climbing mountains. I hate flying on airplanes, I save all of that for this kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Like, I'm not an adventurous type of person, but that little adventurous streak in me, I save it all for this kind of work.
Yeah. Well, this is not theoretical for you. You actually did this stuff. I mean, you actually got these groups together. What was that like the first time that you pulled these groups together in Portland?
Yeah, so we one of the things that CURE-PDX does, maybe I should explain a little bit more about our general mission and approach, right? So it's basically a project which our goal is to prevent political and ideologically motivated violence. So specifically political violence, not community violence, not gang violence, but violence with some kind of political motive or dimension to it, right? And so we do this using what's called the credible messenger approach or violence interrupter approach. So we reach out to different communities that might be at risk of violence or have experienced violence of this sort, and we partner and hire credible messengers or key figures in the community who are uniquely positioned to de-escalate tensions with people they are familiar with, and to leverage their network of credible and trusted connections to be able to change the norms and narratives away from escalatory ones and to more kind of calm down, simmer down, kind of thing. So it's a little bit more decentralized, and I think for the groups that are really radical and revved up and more extreme, it's not ideal. It's very difficult to bring them to the table. They don't want to come to the table. So on one level, it's how do we equip these credible messengers with the skills, these kind of dialogue conversation skills, to be able to engage their community informally, right? So it could be through water cooler conversations, it could be having beers at the bar in Oregon City, it could be shooting at the gun range, it could be during church, it could be doing a mutual aid event or protest or rally in downtown Portland. And you're just engaging these conversations, checking in with people, seeing what they need, and being able to put out fires as you are able to. Then after that, we can start thinking about what are groups that are more amenable or more interested in coming to the table for dialogue. And so we partnered with another organization called ICRD, International Center for Religion and Diplomacy, and had a big retreat for about 7 churches in the Portland area. We held it at Willamette Christian Church in Westland, Oregon last month, and it was fabulous. We did a lot of practice talking about how to deal with the toxic polarization that's cropped up in a lot of faith communities, and we did a lot of practicing and awkward, uncomfortable kind of talking about difficult issues and building that muscle to make our communities more internally resilient to having these difficult conversations. And it was just a blast.
So this was, we're talking about 2 different focuses. One was the violence that was going on in Portland. The other, the second group that you're talking about, where you're meeting with a group of churches, was really unique, because when you were telling me about this, I thought, how did he get these people together? I mean, churches typically tend to be really isolated from each other and not really interact with each other much.
Yes.
There's some relationship, but mostly on the surface. But you're talking about getting 7 different groups of different church leaders together and actually talking about what's going on inside of them.
Yeah.
And they invited you, right? They sought you out and said, we would like to get together and do something that would serve our communities the same way that Portland was served through CURE-PDX.
Yeah, exactly. So just to take one step back before I explain that more, part of the idea is to bring different groups together to build more resilience for their own communities to handle these conversations. Because if you don't do that, one of the things we've talked about, and we talked about this at the retreat, is people felt very aggrieved when longtime church members, friends, community members, even family, there's some kind of fight, and then when they split up, people go to more extreme organizations, communities, groups, right? Like, I don't feel satisfied with my community, I'm going to go further left, further right, whatever. And then that, on a macro level, that's not a good arrangement, because you have more clustering and balkanization and echo chambering going on. And then people in that echo chamber become more and more extreme or radical, or start to kind of dehumanize or other groups that they're not a part of, right? So it's like, how can we, before people start splitting off everywhere, what can we hold together? And that was the theme of this retreat. The theme was the beloved community. How do we hold that together? Yeah. And it was really orchestrated. The whole MVP of the event was a pastor at Imago Dei named Pastor Rick McKinley, who's extremely well connected. He's deeply respected in the community. He's been pastoring the Portland area for, I think, over 20 years. Yeah. He's just stepping down at Imago Dei, but he brought in 7 other churches in the area. I can't remember all of them, and the pastors then invited some key congregants to this retreat, and then we all just talked about what's going on in their communities, and now let's drill really specific conversation techniques and skills so you can better have these conversations without an escalation, without a fight, without some kind of internal divorce, and hold as much ideological and viewpoint diversity internally as you can. Right. Yeah. So that was kind of the 2 days.
The whole setup it fascinates me. I mean, being a church leader for the last 30 plus years, I know how difficult that is. For one, congrats to Rick McKinley for actually having the guts to do it. Yeah. And seeing the need and seeing the value of what happened through CURE-PDX during that really interesting and violent time in Portland. He saw something there that would help the church. Yes. And when I was listening to a teaching by John Tyson, a leader from New York City, the other day, and he was talking about the culture of honor, which just fascinates me. The whole idea of honoring, the whole idea of seeing something that's really valuable in someone else and lifting that thing up. And he started out by talking about contempt, looking at people with contempt and how you tend to look at to lower their value. Yeah. And he said that in the last 5 years, the church has embraced that whole ideology of contempt. And they've become more like the world that way. They've become more like the world. They've become more contemptuous as a group of people. And he says, his whole idea is, let's turn them away, back towards a culture of honor, honoring each other instead of looking down on each other, raise each other up a little bit. And I just think that's so exciting, because must have been a lot of what happened during that gathering of those church leaders that you had recently. They must have saw something in each other that was more valuable than they ever realized before.
I hope that's what they came away with. I hope that's what was cultivated during the dialogue and exercises in the retreat. And a big theme of the retreat that a lot of people shared at the beginning, and they had shared this with a lot of pain in their hearts, was feeling boxed and reduced. They specifically use the word boxed. They feel like if they have a political perspective that someone disagrees with, that one opinion, you're then put in a box, you're labeled, you're dismissed, and you're dehumanized. You're thought of as less than. Not because of a behavior or a character, right? Like, there might be times in life where we have legitimate reasons to think of people who are less than. If you're super unethical, if you cheat, lie, steal, etc. Yeah. We're just talking for if someone has a difference in opinion, you're considered less than. That's, to me, the real danger, right?
So when I say contempt, you're using the word dehumanize, which seems even stronger.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I don't want to be dehumanized by anyone. Personally, I don't want to be.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to talk about mostly today is I have a lot of friends who are pastors and leaders, and this has been a really rough 5 years for them. Mm. And for a lot of different reasons, there's been a lot of polarization, a lot of division, and they struggle a lot because what you end up with is two people sitting in church together next to each other in seats beside each other who have completely different views on things. Mm. And they used to be friends. I mean, most people that go to church want to be around people who think just like them. We tend to congregate around people who think like us, and we want to be comfortable. And it was a really uncomfortable time because you had two people who felt very differently about what was going on in the world around them. Mm. And I think for pastors, it was particularly difficult because both groups want to be affirmed. And they want to know that they're okay. They want to know that they can have different opinions and still be part of the same church. And it wasn't so much refereeing, it was more encouragement to be yourself and to believe what you're going to believe, but still keep loving each other. Mm. So what kind of encouragement, Ryan, would you give to pastors and leaders who have that community, that faith community that they're part of, with people who have very different opinions about things that are really important to them, but maybe not to the person they're sitting next to?
You know, I have always thought, and I don't know how this is possible practically, but I think the end goal that I want to help people cultivate is this sense that it's cool, it's awesome, the more internal diversity we can hold, right? And the analogy or metaphor I always use is there's a marriage and family therapist, and he was asked how much difference between partners is ideal in a marriage, and he says as much as you can reasonably tolerate, right? And I think of that
I have a marriage like that. We're very different.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and so I'm sure you can speak to. There's challenges with that, and there can be something really dynamic and really amazing and really fruitful and really growthful from that.
The word you used was spicy.
Yeah, it can definitely get a little spicy, but I think when you have a group that can hold that spiciness at the appropriate level, you really do gain a lot of different benefits from it. I'll just name a few practical ones, right? So one benefit, obviously, when you have people with different perspectives or different lenses, you'll see things differently, and certain people with certain lenses will illuminate or make salient one pattern from life, and other people will see different things that these guys will not see, and these guys will see things that these guys will not see. So if we bring it all together, we can say, hey, we can actually get a more complex, more complete picture of the entire situation when we bring these different perspectives together and get them on the table, right? So it's less of a mutually exclusive, my correct perspective has to supersede yours, but more, how can we fill in the gaps of each other's perspectives and perceptions to get a bigger picture of the whole, right? And I think the second one too is that people who tend to have different views, the birds of a feather flock together effect is a real thing. So when you have people or a community with different views, that usually means that the networks that community is associated with are also across lines, right? So if everyone believes the same thing, their social networks and their associations all tend to cluster in the same pattern.
Right.
But when you have a community with people of different perspectives, all of those people represent networks that could fan out across a huge swath of society, and so you're able to reach other communities through them that you would not have otherwise reached, and you're ensuring that you're not getting into a little echo chamber, right? Yeah, you can keep that complexity, and there's actually one of my favorite words is called collective intelligence, and collective intelligence means that the intelligence of the group as a whole transcends the intelligence of the individual brains in that group, right? So people actually can become smarter when you bring diverse perspectives together, more intelligent than even the smartest individuals in that group. And I think that's something that we can try to work towards. And I've tried to develop different trainings and toolkits and workshops that help to create this shift and cultivate that. Because the only real way to do it, right, ultimately is through trust and through structured dialogue and interactions between people that feel safe and productive and feel structured enough that people are willing to engage with them.
Right.
And then once you have those, though, you can then do them iteratively in your community to have everyone kind of build that muscle of handling difference, handling tensions, and still loving you as an individual and valuing you as a community member, even if we see things differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we can strive to get to.
Well, what's interesting is there's a biblical basis for all this. I mean, in the Bible, it talks about the value that the body parts have. and the diversity of those body parts and how we need each other and how we shouldn't push away from each other, but we should embrace each other, because the body is made up of a lot of different body parts, and as they function together, the body can become stronger and more influential and more loving and more caring and more expressive. And, so it's interesting to me that the Bible lifts that up as a very high value, and yet it's so very hard for us to go there because of comfort. Our comfort level seems to be with being around people who think just like us. Honestly, I love being around people who are different than I am, because I grow every time I'm around them. Yeah. And I feel better about myself as I learn from other people about things that are important in this world.
Yeah, I love that. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, you can do it.
Is that okay to do that on your podcast? Yeah. So I like how you're talking about a kind of a biblical foundation or basis to frame some of the things we're talking about here. Do you think one of the issues is that people will have different interpretations of that and therefore not come to the same conclusion that we're arriving at here? Or if you were to offer that as a message to people who are not as on board with this idea, what do you think their pushback would be, and what would you say to their pushback on that?
Well, one of the things I think happens is congregations feel like they're one of those body parts. They're all self-contained in these boxes that meet on Sundays, and they don't necessarily have to engage with the other body parts. They know they're out there, and it's fine. I'm a hand, and I know there are feet out there, but I don't really have to stay connected because my connection is through my relationship with Jesus. So Jesus is a connector, and which is kind of an easy out and kind of lame, I think, because it's really clear what Paul writes. This whole encouragement for us to be connected with each other and value each other, and we're better together than we are apart, and we shouldn't have contempt for each other, but we should have honor for each other. It's really clear, but we've framed it in a way that gives us an easy out, so we don't have to have a relationship with each other. I'm fine being a hand. I'll just hang around hands.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's really not what he's talking about. He says in those Bible verses, he's the head over the whole body. And I think the head is really wanting the hands to coordinate with each other and the feet to coordinate. I think it's really important. And so, yeah, I can see how we could rationalize that away certain ways, but it doesn't make any sense to me. It seems really clear. It seems like we're ignoring the obvious.
Yeah. Well, it seems like we both share a kind of natural interest. Like, it's almost fun to meet people with very different views. And I've talked to people who have really, really out there perspectives on things. But even though I disagree with the specific content or substance of what they said, I still enjoyed it because it was like looking at the world upside down. And I just felt almost like a sense of creativity. Like that was such a different reality from the one I live in that I kind of opened my mind a little bit more, not based on specifically what they said, but just the fact that they had a different perspective from me, So
Which is very different. I've run into leaders who get a little annoyed with me that I don't think like they think, and feel like, I feel like I can't really be friends with. They don't really want to be friends with me if I don't think like they think. And so, even as a leader myself, personally, Ryan, I really want to know how I can move towards people that don't necessarily want to move towards me, because I think there's value in it. I think there's value in those relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me how to do it, Ryan. Tell me. How do I get there?
That's it. One of the cliche ideas in this space that's very basic, but it's worth reiterating is, if you can't find common ground on a specific theological point or political point or something, what are all the other ways you could build more connections with the person?
Yeah.
Like, do they like fishing? Do they, what are other things? What are other ways we can connect just as human beings who are having fun and enjoying each other's presence? And maybe the other stuff can be broached later on, right?
Yeah.
But what kind of common ground are we able to find right now? And I think what's unfortunate in today's age is that people have become so personally identified with their ideology that sometimes it feels like you can't actually separate the two, right? It's like, in order to see me as a person, you have to see me through my ideological label or self-affiliation. And it's harder to go straight into the personal and completely bracket the political stuff or the theological stuff or the philosophical stuff, because it's all kind of mixed together, right? And so sometimes I have had conversations with people where I think they were initially very skeptical talking to me, but over a 3-4 hour iterative, 3-month conversation series of listening, asking questions, they quickly saw that I wasn't going to judge them or box them or retaliate against what they were saying, and that created a sense of safety and a sense of trust. And they were okay knowing that we don't see things eye to eye because they know that I'm not going to lambaste them or attack them for a difference.
But are they looking for empathy from you? I mean, can you feel it? Can you feel when people want you to be empathetic about what they think and what their ideology personally? Can you just sense that when you're with somebody who wants you to empathize with them?
It's. I was having a conversation about this earlier, where I think sometimes people are really frustrated. They feel like they have no one to talk to or that understands them. They feel like they're canceled from their in-group or ostracized, and so you can feel immediately in the anger and frustration that that they're really hungering for some kind of empathy and acknowledgement and a listening ear. Yeah. And many people have explicitly thanked me for, like, you know what? It's been 2 hours. All you've done is listen. You didn't push back. You didn't attack me. Thank you. That's refreshing. That's a first. Yeah. I think other people I've talked to, they might have started the conversation off with what appeared to me as a more bad faith or trolling attitude. But surprisingly, just sticking with it, even the trolling bad faith demeanor that they put on, there was still some genuine hurt underneath that caused them to act like that. Yeah. And so once you're able to get to that deeper thing and unpack that, people's entire demeanors have changed. I have a friend who's a master at online social media de-escalation. And he has a political project, and he gets a lot of trolls and people saying all kind of really nasty things to him, making threats. And he'll text me on the phone screenshots of what people are sending him on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Wow. And he'll show me the first 3 sentences. I'm like, just block the person. This person's not coming in good faith. He'll talk to them for an hour, back and forth on the keyboard. He'll text me with what happens. My mind's blown. It's like magic. They're a completely different person. He untrolled them, That is crazy. I don't have the patience on social media. I'm better at, in person. But, sometimes just whittling away at that, you'll surprise yourself. Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you enough how valuable this stuff is. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this interview was to introduce you to the friends of mine who are pastors and leaders and say, this guy lives in Toledo with his wife and 7 goats. This is the guy's accessible. He's not very far away. And I know that you want to be there you want to help facilitate more of these conversations. So part of it was I just wanted to introduce you to the community around Cowlitz County that really needs encouragement and strength and help and tools, like you said, to be able to do this. So thank you so much for making yourself accessible to me. I really appreciate that, Ryan. I appreciate what you're doing and the level you're doing it at, which is much higher than anything I've ever experienced before. And you're a delight to be around. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. Yeah. Real pleasure. I'm honored to be, introduced to your friends. And I don't have a lot of connections past Vancouver area, up I-5. So it's nice to finally kind of, get into the kind of Cowlitz scene more, and Lewis County too, or in my neck of the woods. So
well, thank you.
I appreciate it.